Ghislaine, Maxwell's first accuser known as Jane, took the stand to testify that she was 14 years old when she first had sexual contact with Jeffrey Epstein. In bombshell testimony Tuesday afternoon, the woman, using the pseudonym Jane, said Ghislaine Maxwell was in the room during the alleged abuse. Wearing a grey wrap-around sweater, a black dress and black boots, she pushed back her jet black hair and took off her mask after the judge reassured her that the sketch artists could not draw her likeness. She detailed to prosecutor Alison Moe how Epstein would have her straddle his face, pinch his nipples, and described the first sexual encounter that took place in 1994 when he took her into a pool house and proceeded to masturbate on me. Jane said Epstein was talking to her about what I wanted to do with her life and said that she had to choose between being an opera singer or an actress or a model. She recalled, "He said I know everybody, I know agents, photographers, I can make things happen but you have to be ready for it." The conversation ended abruptly. We were in his office, and he said follow me. They went outside to the pool house and Epstein sat on a couch to the right-hand side. He pulled his pants down, he pulled me on top of himself and he proceeded to masturbate on me. Then he just got up and went into the bathroom and cleaned himself up and acted as if nothing had happened. She said, "I was frozen in fear. I had never seen a penis before, let alone something like this. I was terrified and I felt gross. I felt ashamed." Despite this, she continued spending time with Epstein and Maxwell, and shortly after, she had her first sexual encounter with Maxwell. Epstein and Maxwell were talking when all of a sudden they said follow me and led her to Epstein's bedroom in his Palm Beach home. They came into the bedroom and took their clothes off. They started sort of fondling each other and kind of casually giggling, Jane said. "I was just standing there and he asked me to take my top off and then their hands were everywhere and Jeffrey proceeded to masturbate and Ghislaine was rubbing him and kissing him and fondling." Jane said Maxwell was very casual about the encounter and acted like this was entirely normal. "I was confused. When you are 14 you have no idea what is going on." The prosecutor asked, "Did Maxwell touch your body?" "Yes," Jane replied, saying the sexual abuse happened every time I visited his house. When asked if Epstein touched her, Jane replied, "Yes, everywhere." The woman spoke in a strong, deep voice that only faltered when she was describing in graphic detail the sex acts Epstein and Maxwell allegedly did to her. Maxwell did not appear to react to any of the woman's testimony, including when Jane pointed her out in court to identify her. Wearing a black high-neck top and grey cardigan, Jane had a tissue scrunched up in her hand and nabbed her nose when she became emotional. Her voice began shaking when she told how Epstein would touch her everywhere. She shuffled in her seat and took off her cardigan, appearing hot and a bit flustered. In brief breaks, Jane avoided any eye contact with Maxwell, who looked away from the witness box. On the one occasion Jane did look over in her direction, Maxwell was joking with her lawyers. As her visits to Epstein's home became more regular, Jane said that both Epstein and Maxwell would instruct her on how to massage him. Jane said, "He liked it very hard, like rubbing his shoulders very hard, twisting his nipples hard." Jane would later say that Epstein liked her to twist his nipples while he was abusing her. Asked what Maxwell's demeanor was like during this, Jane said, "It seemed very casual, it was very normal. It's not a big deal." Jane said it made her feel confused because that did not feel normal to me because I had never seen anything like that and it was very embarrassing. When you're 14 you have no idea what's going on. Asked if Epstein touched her body, Jane said that he touched her breasts, vagina. Mo asked if Epstein used sex toys, telling her, "I'm sorry to ask you this, but could you please describe what happened?" Jane appeared to come close to tears as she said, "He liked vibrators, they were different sizes, even a back massager. Head put it on my vagina, even if I said it hurt." Asked where Maxwell touched her, Jane said it was mainly my breasts. Mo asked where Epstein liked to be touched, and Jane said that it was from head to toe and that this happened every visit to his house. Mo asked if there were times when other people took part in sex, and Jane said yes, adding that it usually happened in the massage room or the bedroom in Epstein's Palm Beach home. She said that Maxwell would encourage others to start taking their clothes off, Jeffrey would get on the massage table and it would turn into this orgy. Jane said, "It was kissing, oral sex with each other, oral sex with Jeffrey, full-on intercourse." Asked if sex toys were used, Jane said yes and that vibrators were used on girls' vaginas. Mo asked the gender of the other people in the orgy and Jane said, "Female." Asked their age, she said, "Older than me, but I don't know." Mo asked how often these kind of sex sessions took place when she was aged between 14 and 16 and she said, "Almost every visit with him. I was going every 2 weeks." Jane said that she traveled with Epstein and Maxwell about 10 times when she was aged between 14 and 16 and flew to his homes in New York and New Mexico. She found his New York mansion creepy because of all the pictures of naked girls on the walls, she told the jury. Jane described how she first came to know Epstein in 1993. She was 12, going on 13, and living in Palm Beach, Florida with her family when tragedy struck. Her father, a composer, died of leukemia. His employers had cancelled his health insurance and when he did, their family went into complete bankruptcy and lost everything, Jane said. The following summer, relatives cobbled together the money to pay for her and her brothers to go to Interlochen, a summer arts camp in Michigan. It was 9 months after her father died, Jane said. She remembered that one day she and her classmates were on a bench eating ice cream when a tall, thin woman approached us. Jane said, "She was walking a cute little Yorkie and we asked if we could pet the dog. We started chit-chatting and the rest of my classmates had to go to class." Shortly after, a man came to join Jane and Maxwell. Jane said, "I was still eating my ice cream. He seemed very interested to know what I thought of the camp. They said they were big benefactors of this camp and gave out different kinds of scholarships and wanted to know the students' perspective." When Jane said she was from Palm Beach, Epstein replied, "What a coincidence. We live there too. What are your parents' names?" I said, "My father has just died." Epstein said that he definitely knew her mother and then asked for her number, which Jane handed over. She seemed surprised but handed it over and the conversation ended with, "Nice to meet you." Around a month later, when Jane was back at middle school, somebody from Epstein's office called her home and asked her and her mother round for tea at his mansion in Palm Beach. Their visit lasted around 30 minutes and Epstein told Jane's mother that he was very impressed with her and wanted her to come back next time and sing for him. So began Jane's regular visits to Epstein's house, where Maxwell would often be at home. Jane said she was confused by the exact relationship between the two of them and initially thought they were married, but later wasn't sure. She said that Maxwell was approximately the same age as her older sister. Prosecutor Mo asked, "How old were you when you first started spending time with Epstein and Maxwell?" An early incident which left Jane shocked was one day when she went out by the pool and saw Maxwell and 4 other women topless. Jane hadn't seen that before, she told the jury. Jane described Maxwell as a bit odd and quirky and said she used to tease me, but she was nice. Jane said, I think she may have said "im" like an older sister to you. At the time, Jane's older sister was 27 and Maxwell was in her early 30s. Epstein began to give Jane money as she left the house after each visit, which were around every week or two, telling her that her mother was having a hard time. It's not a big deal. Epstein began to buy Jane clothes and other things. She gave Jane advice about her boyfriends, once telling her, if you f*** them once you can f*** them again because they are grandfathered in. Jane said, I giggled because I didn't understand what grandfathered meant. Epstein and Maxwell took her to Victoria's Secret to buy her underwear. Jane said she bought the basic white kind that younger people buy. Maxwell and Epstein would brag about knowing famous people like Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, which left Jane feeling intimidated. She told the jury. She said she traveled to his other homes about 10 times in New York and New Mexico on Epstein's private plane and described the decor. Art, sculptures, pictures of famous people, presidents. I thought some of the art was odd, naked women, creepy animals, she recalled. She said the abuse at his New York home would happen in the massage room. During the trips to New Mexico, Jane said she spent most of her time at his Zorro ranch in the middle of nowhere. Jane cried when she talked about how one of Epstein's aides entered her guest room at his ranch, saying the financier wanted her in his bedroom. I felt my heart sink. I didn't want to go see him. She asked the prosecutor, do you need me to explain in detail? As she appeared pained when describing the abuse in detail. She repeatedly asked Mo to repeat questions, failing to understand. Maxwell's lawyer Laura Menninger cross-examined Jane, asking her if it was correct that she waited 20 years to speak to law enforcement. Jane said that was correct. Menninger asked if it was correct that Jane said she escaped Epstein in 1999 and she confirmed that it was. Menninger said, the first time you spoke to law enforcement was after Epstein was dead. Jane said, yes. Menninger said that during the last 20 years Jane had spoken to family members and a boyfriend about Epstein. Menninger said that Jane had never mentioned that Ghislaine Maxwell had sexually assaulted you to any of them. Jane said, I was reluctant to go into details about embarrassing, shameful and despicable things. I didn't want to share it with them in the first place. Menninger said, did you tell them about Epstein? Menninger said, did you talk to them about Ghislaine Maxwell? Asked why she wanted to give evidence using a pseudonym, Jane said that she had a family and children. She said, I work in the entertainment industry and victim shaming is still very present to this day and I was afraid it was going to affect my career if somebody looks at me and that's all they see and wouldn't hire me based on that. Cross-examination of Jane will continue on Wednesday. Earlier on Tuesday, Larry Vysotsky, Epstein's chief pilot who flew the pedophile financier for more than 25 years, said he was introduced to Jane in the cockpit of the Lolita Express in the mid to late 90s. Mr. Epstein brought her to the cockpit. She had piercing powder blue eyes, Vysotsky said. Maxwell's attorney Christian Everdell asked during cross-examination, and beyond the striking blue eyes, you have said she had large breasts, right? Vysotsky answered that she was a mature woman. When asked if he remembers Virginia Roberts, Vysotsky replied, yes, a shorter woman with dirty blonde hair. She didn't look young. I mean, whatever you decipher is the definition of young. But she was a woman in my category, he added, despite being called as a prosecution witness. Vysotsky's testimony appeared to aid the defense. I never saw any sexual activity, no, Vysotsky said, but admitted that he could not see everything that went on. Asked if he ever saw any sex toys, condoms or clothing strewn about the plane, he said no and denied seeing any sexual activity of any kind. On Monday during opening statement, Maxwell's defense attorney Bobby Sternheim began by introducing Jane as a talented musician and a singer from a musical family. She took aim at Jane and attempted to discredit her account. She described Jeffrey Epstein as a patron of the arts and a supporter of young talent, sponsored musicians and artists and actresses and others. Epstein, Sternheim said, became Jane's benefactor and paid for her schooling, vocal lessons and even co-signed for an apartment on Wall Street where Jane lived with her mother and brothers. A month before Epstein's arrest in 2019, Jane did not want to be involved in any criminal case regarding Epstein, Sternheim said. But after Epstein died, she changed her mind. When money was on the line, she changed her mind. She hired a lawyer, she became a client, they got in touch with the government, and said she changed her mind. Why? Because assisting the government would help a claim with the Epstein Fund. Sternheim added that once Epstein died and Jane had a lawyer by her side, she suddenly remembers all this horror that happened to her and places Ghislaine at the center of it all. Hundreds of things that happened to her that no one knew about, not her mother, not her brothers, not her teachers, not staff at the house, not her coaches, all of this that the government claims happened and she didn't skip a beat, nobody ever noticed anything amiss. Sternheim said that Jane is now a successful actress on a soap opera and has been on sitcoms, reality shows, movies, podcasts and drama series. She is a consummate actress, she is a pro at playing roles, and as her scripts and characters change, so has her story that you will hear in this courtroom, Sternheim said. I ask you to examine her testimony, and you will find internal inconsistencies. When money was on the line, she tagged Ghislaine. Sternheim revealed that Jane received $5 million from the victim's fund. Maxwell entered the Manhattan courtroom Tuesday morning wearing a cream sweater, black slacks and looked on as Wysoski was questioned. I certainly remember President Trump, but not many people associated with him, Wysoski said, adding that Trump's flights happened before he was president. Wysoski also confirmed that President Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew and Kevin Spacey were all aboard his flights. He added that he was asked to clean up after Clinton's flight, but did not elaborate. Wysoski said that the doors to the cabin on Epstein's planes were always shut and he had no way of observing what was going on. The famous names came up in the context of whether Wysoski knew who was flying on the Gulfstream G-2B and Boeing 727, known as the Lolita Express. During cross-examination, Everdell asked Wysoski, "Are you aware of Prince Andrew, the Duke of York? He is the son of Queen Elizabeth II of England." Everdell said, "Did he fly on Epstein's planes?" Everdell asked, "Do you recall the first time he flew on a plane?" Earlier Everdell asked Wysoski if he knew the names of all the people who flew on his plane, and he said no. Everdell said, former President Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane a few times in the 2000s. Wysoski replied, "Yes he did." Everdell said, "You might be told that information in advance so you might make sure the plane was looking nice, special catering." Wysoski also confirmed that Les Wexner, the founder of the Limited, which owns Victoria's Secret, was on planes that he flew. Wysoski said that doors between the cockpit and the passenger cabin were closed, but he said that he could go to the back whenever he wanted to use the toilet. He again said he never saw any sexual activity. Curiously, during his cross-examination by Everdell, Wysoski was asked, "Ghislaine never appeared to be pregnant." Everdell asked, "Did anyone ever tell you she was pregnant?" Wysoski said that nobody ever said that. Everdell asked if the pilot ever saw pictures of her pregnant. He replied, "No, I did not." Wysoski said Maxwell was the number 2 and that Epstein was the big number 1 when asked about their relationship. When asked how many other assistants Epstein had in addition to Maxwell, he replied that there were many, identifying Maxwell's own assistants. He specifically named Sarah Kellen, who has been accused of playing a pivotal role in Epstein's empire, procuring girls, coaching them and acting as a lieutenant to Maxwell. Vysotsky was also asked to identify parts of Epstein's 10,000-acre Zorro ranch in New Mexico where airplanes were parked. He said he would often go to the main residence to pick up luggage and help install electronics. Vysotsky said he performed similar tasks on Epstein's private Caribbean island Little Street, James, and would also fly the helicopter to the island from nearby St. Thomas. He added that the island could also be reached by boat.